Hey guys, welcome back. It's me, Gimpy, and I'm finally doing a video I've been asked to do numerous times so far, which is to take and do my top 5 solitaire war games. And I say specifically war games because this list would be different if I was doing just my top 5 solitaire games. Leaving Earth, for example, is not a war game per se. Well, not at all. But excellent game that I've enjoyed, and I'm actually going to be doing a video on that one soon, as soon as I can get it to the table for you guys. But excellent game. Plays perfectly solitaire. Actually, I think it plays better solitaire than it probably would as a multiplayer game. I mean, you can play it multiplayer. It's designed for it. You guys will see when I do the video on it, but it would be included in this list if I was doing more than just the war games. But I'm focusing on just the war games for this video. And keep in mind, this is also a list of the videos or the games that I've actually played. Okay, so there are some that could potentially be on this list. For example, Enemy Action Ardennes. I've played it, but I haven't played it enough to make a final conclusion of it, and I haven't done my video run through of it yet. That is on the table to be done at some point. D-Day at Omaha, Tarawa, Peleliu, those games, obviously good solitaire games, but I haven't gotten around to them yet. I actually do have a copy of D-Day at Omaha that it's just taken me time to get it down to the table. So it's based off of what I've played thus far. Keep that in mind on the list. Not all of these games are solitaire only. These are games that I believe are good solo games, but not all of them are designed just for solo play. So it's got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But let's take and get started with my number 5. So number 5, as you can see, is Silent Victory by Consim Press. Now, I picked Silent Victory because that's the one I have, but there are a couple of different versions. You've got, was it the Hunters and the Hunted, whatever versions, where you're playing the German submarine captain instead of the American submarine captain. Same basic principle. I know the Hunters doesn't have the campaign type map that this one does, that Silent Victory does. It uses the grid base that you see there on the right, player aid, but it's still relatively the same game. Your targets change. The names of what you're shooting at changes, but the principle of the game is the same. So I'm going with Silent Victory, but you could put the Hunters or Hunted, whichever one, into this category. And honestly, you could take and probably put the B-17 one, Target for Today, into this category. I have not played Target for Today. That is a solitaire only game as well by Legion Games. I am interested in playing that one, and will have it on my table at some point when I get it. But same principle. You're running your vessel, you have to manage your crew, you have to manage your loadout, and then you're trying to take out specific targets and make it back, and things like that. For me, Silent Victory fills this. And as you can see, I'm showing it on the screen now, it does have some app assistance. Now, this app isn't designed by the developer themselves. A third party did make the app, but it makes it a lot quicker, and it reduces a lot of the dice rolling that some people didn't like when it came to the game. One of the neat parts of this game is the excessive dice rolling in a way, because you have hundreds of historical Japanese targets to actually go after. They're listed down. They're real ships that were involved in World War II, whether they fought in it, were sank, etc. It's got a list of something like 300 or 400 actual Japanese ships that you can take and go after as your targets. And that is one of the neatest things to me, to know that, hey, this large freighter that weighed so many 1,000 tons was an actual target in World War II. It's an actual ship that existed. That was one of the things that people did have an issue with, though, because to figure out what targets you had to go after, you had to roll so many dice to figure out whether it's large or small, and then so many dice to figure out whether it's going to be A, B, or C on the list, and then so many dice to figure out where on A, B, or C your actual target was. And then you had to do that 3 or 4 times in between selecting your targets. The app took away some of that pain in the butt minutia that came with the game. Either way, it didn't bother me rolling the extra dice. It was just a little bit of time, and like I said, with this game, it's mindless fun. You know, you don't have to burn your brain to understand what's going on. You know that, hey, I'm going to proceed from my port of origin to here. I'm going to run so many missions along this area, and then I'm going to return, and I'm going to make decisions on how many torpedoes I'm going to fire, or what targets I'm going to engage, or if I have any special missions during that period of time. And then you're going to, head on back to your dock. I will say the game has excellent component quality, plenty of counters, more than enough counters to cover all the ships that are in it. I found myself not needing the majority of the ship counters that are actually in the game. So that's one thing that I do appreciate, is that there's more than enough there to represent everything that you need. They have a couple of different types of damage counters even for your vessel when you're keeping track of the damage that you take, whether or not you want to take and annotate the specific damage that you're taking, or if you just want to use generic counters. And they have counters representing the awards that you receive, the battle stars that you receive for completing so many different missions. Then you can get things like Purple Heart and Bronze Star, and actual medals that you get in the military. Those are actually in the game, and you can take and earn those depending on what happens during your mission. Now, the game also has excellent replay value. If you want to take and just have one evening where you just run one mission, one patrol, and put it away, that's fine. You can do that, no qualms with it, and still have just as much fun with it. But if you want to take and have an ongoing campaign where you take and select your sub and you sail it out, go on your missions, come back, refit and repair depending on what type of damage that you take, and then you want to go on another mission with your same sub, same crew, after you've been restocked, and see what happens, you can play that campaign. You can play through pretty much the entirety of the war. It's not the entire war. It's based on, when U.S. submarines were operating. But the U.S. submarine campaign, you can play through that whole campaign and see how well you do and how many thousands of tons that you sink of Japanese ships during that time. And like I said, it's, depending on what happens and whether or not you're using the app to kind of save time, this is something that if you've got just an hour before you're sitting down or getting ready to go to bed, or something to that effect, you can take and fold it out real quick, lay out your player aids, throw out your counters, and bam, you're good to go. It's not hard to keep track of. The game itself is easy. Once you've learned it, you pretty much know it. There was only one rule that I had missed in it when I was playing it, that had to do with transporting a passenger because of the specific type of sub that I was using, and I just missed it because I could not find it in the rule book for some damn reason. But a subscriber was nice enough to point that out to me. But I still pull this out to this day. Occasionally, I'll pull it out and just run a mission just to keep adding it up, and I still have my campaign going. I don't have to refresh myself hard on the rules. The player aids have all the information that I need right there on them, and I can remind myself really quickly how to play the game. It's not hard. I definitely suggest this one as an excellent solitaire game for anyone who's interested in World War II submarines. Check this one out. It is out of print, I do believe, from Concept Press. You can find them on eBay. You can find them on sometimes Amazon if one gets thrown on there. Board Game Geek, you can find it on. However, there is a reprint of The Hunters, and I think it's the one where it's called The Hunted, that's coming out by GMT. Same basic principle. It's going to have updated game components, and that one should be coming out later this year. So I think it is on the P500 list. If you're interested in a game like this, like Silent Victory, like The Hunters, check that out. What's this? A non-solitaire only game? I know that's what you're asking yourself. Yep, this is Unconditional Surrender by GMT Games. Excuse me. And yeah, absolutely, this is going on my top 5 solitaire list. I love this game. I fell in love with this game before I even had it. And it's actually been on my tables longer than I think any other game, strangely enough. I haven't had as many videos up of it as I would like, just because I haven't been able to get to it. But this game is excellent. It simulates World War II in Europe, obviously. Unconditional Surrender in Europe. Actually, they're coming out with Unconditional Surrender in the Pacific, which would be great. I'm definitely looking forward to whenever that comes out. But this game, you control a faction, whether it's the Axis, the Allies, or the Soviets, and you attempt to win World War II, and you have the option to take and kind of play it however you would like. It has ahistorical options. You don't have to kind of follow along with how the war actually played out. You can try to take and influence other nations to go to your side or against your enemies, things like that. And that's really the big thing for me, what makes this a very solitaire friendly game. Yes, you are playing all sides yourself. All right, you have to do that. But the big thing is the diplomacy system and how it works in this game. And watch my videos if you want more specifics on it. But the short version on it is that you take and have a cup that has different markers in it depending on what's happened in the game. And it has, success, failure, no effect, or land seizure, or sometimes if you've conquered a country you get more of your basically success markers in it, but it would be just for one side, like just the Axis side. And what you're using those for is to influence the other minor nations that are neutral at that point to join your side. And it works very well for a solo game because with it being a chit draw, you're not having to make that decision. It's coming out randomly. You make the choice whether or not to draw a chit, but you have to kind of play it out depending on how it is drawn, what comes out. And in my game, Spain has actually joined the Allies. Romania, they joined the Axis. Norway, Sweden, and Finland all haven't gotten involved yet. The Axis is trying to get Yugoslavia to come in on their side. Italy obviously came in on the Axis side. It's very hard for them not to. But all those minor nations, they can all go different directions depending on how those chit draws come out. Like the Axis in the game that I'm playing, they're trying, like I said, to get Yugoslavia, but there's no guarantee. Depending on how the draw comes out, they could end up going Allied and end up shooting into the south of Germany and trying to go after them. It gives that open historical playability. You don't have to take and play out the game as history played out, and that's what I really like about it. That's what I've been looking for in a strategic game, was the ability to play the war as I see fit. Now, one of the things I did make a mistake on it, and I'm going to correct it in my next video, that some of the minor nations, they can't leave their borders. They can only use their units within their borders. That I wish wasn't the case. I'll play it that way for my video just because I have to, but I would almost rather it not be that way. That way it could just be however you want it to be. I want that ultimate freedom, and I might play a game after I'm done filming it where I play it that way, but you have the option. I mean, it's your game. You can play it however you want. You don't have to follow the rules to a T if you don't want to, but it has much more than that in it. The big thing that also goes along with it is the light counter density. You can see, I mean, for a strategic game covering World War II, there's not a whole lot of counters on the board, and they don't stack up. There's another game similar to this, Absolute Victory, that I have played and I do like. All right, it's by Compass Games, but it is very counter heavy. I mean, you would have stacks of counters on all the different hexes, and it just starts to weigh you down after a while. And in this, you don't have that. You, generally speaking, are only going to have one counter in a hex, maybe depending if you've got a ship or plane or land vehicle. But generally, you're not going to have more than one or two counters in a hex. And the counters don't have any combat values. And you're going, what? No combat values? No defense, no offense, no movement values, nothing like that to worry about. The counters simply show what they are, basically infantry, air unit, or tanks, things of that nature, and their origin, their nation. You don't have to worry about, well, this counter's got this factor and this counter's got this factor. You just basically have to worry about, well, this counter is, and it's handled by die roll modifiers. Basically, Germany has a flat +2 bonus. America, France, and I think Britain, I'm not sure about Britain, have +1 bonuses. So they use those modifiers to account for the fact that some militaries are better than others. For example, the Russian military wasn't that good, especially in the early part of the war when Stalin was making a lot of bad choices. So they don't get a bonus to their attacks, but they are going to have more counters on the board than their opponents, than the other side during the conflict. So it's all handled through just die roll modifiers. And not just that, but all combat is handled on the same combat result table. So you only have one CRT. You don't have a CRT for land battles, and then one for air, and then one for naval, or anything else to consider. You have one CRT that's easy to understand, whether it's retreat, eliminated, disrupted, attrition. Yeah, it's got a explanation down below it on the player aid. But it's very easy to read on what the effects are of the roll, and you just have to take and look, okay, well, these are the modifiers for this land battle, same CRT. Well, these are the modifiers for the air battle, same CRT. These are the modifiers for the sea battles, same CRT. And like your airplanes, I'm not going to explain everything, but like your airplanes can't get destroyed for the most part. They just have sorties added to them, and if they have too many, then they can't operate. And that CRT has the amount of sorties that get added to the aircraft, right next to, defender disrupted or defender eliminated, whatever the result is. That way it is all condensed. And on this game, they went for a streamlining of grand strategic games, something that you could set out and actually, if you really focused on it, play through the campaign in a weekend. If you and your buddies wanted to play through it, you could do so in a weekend because you don't have the buckets of counters and all the different bookkeeping and all this other stuff to worry about it. They tried to streamline it as absolutely much as they possibly could while still keeping a tactical and intriguing game to play. I love this game. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I don't get near as much time with it as I would actually love to. The economy is one of the other things that they focused on, and basically, let me try to explain this in a way that makes sense. You have so many factories. Your factories give you so many production points depending on your nation, either one or two, depending on how industrialized you are, and you use those points for everything. You use them to buy troops, you use them to move troops, you use them to movement and attack is the same thing roughly, but you'll use them to do everything. But you're also using them to buy chit pulls in the diplomacy cup. So taking out your opponent's factories that are on the board will weaken their economy, and it's simulated very well in the game that as their economy goes down, they do everything else worse. They're not going to be able to move their troops as much. They're not going to be able to do diplomacy as well because their country's starting to falter. And the only other thing that you have to keep track of is the national will, and it has a nice little player aid that shows you what changes on national will depending on what happened, units being destroyed or cities being captured. And then as the national will goes down, when it hits a certain point, the country collapses and it's conquered or seized, taken over, whatever happens. It's all done with as few player aids and bookkeeping and anything else that you have to keep track of as possible. So when it comes to a solitaire game, having this all streamlined so you don't have pages and pages of notes that you have to take to keep track of how many production points you have left. You just have one counter that you have to move. Hey, I'm moving this unit, and you move your counter over by one. You got it, and you're keeping track of it. And production points don't transfer turn to turn. So you don't get to stockpile them and save them up. If you don't use them that turn, they're gone. You just have whatever your factories produce the next turn. So it cuts out all that nitty-gritty bookkeeping. You just need to know, hey, I have this many factories, so I have this many production points, and bam. The only thing is, yes, you do have to take and play both sides to the best of your ability, but any wargamer has done that before. And when it comes to a grand strategic style game, I have not encountered any others besides Unconditional Surrender that do it as well as this one does when it comes to playing all the sides. When I'm playing the allies, I really do feel like I'm pushing a certain strategy for them. The Axis, I was going very aggressive. The Allies, I'm trying to be defensive and hold property. The Soviets haven't entered the war yet in my game. Excuse me, I'm getting all choked up here. I'm all excited about it. So, even still that you're playing it by yourself and you are controlling all the sides, you still can surprise yourself. You can still feel like you are playing against an opponent and just kind of letting the game play itself out. I would suggest that if you do get the game to play it solo, that you take and pick a strategy for each side and what they're going to do. For example, on mine, the Axis are aggressive, so they're pushing as hard as they can. The Allies are defensive at this point, so they're just trying to hold their land. That way, you're not as much having your bias affect the outcome of the game. You know, hey, this is the strategy. They're going to try to hold this line, whatever the cost. Or they're going to try to push past this line, whatever the cost. They also have historical unit entry for the game. So there's a big calendar there on the top of the board. And you can see the CRT there on the screen right now that I was mentioning earlier. But there's a big calendar on the board there at the top that you can lay out all the units. And as time goes on, as the months go on, each turn is a month roughly, certain units will come out. So they come out historically when they would have had access to them in the game. You can play shorter scenarios in this game if you want, just the invasion of Poland or France or whatever you want, or you can do the entire grand campaign. I would absolutely recommend doing the campaign. Once you've got the rules down, once you've got it down to the table, it will eat your life up because you'll start thinking about, well, what can I do? Can I do this? I could have done this strategy. The Axis are going to do this. And you just get your mind wrapped up in it. And for a game you're playing by yourself, it just really digs into you and it just catches a hold of you. Only other stuff I'll touch on is the component quality. Component quality is fine. They do offer mounted boards for this game, but it is an extra purchase. It's paper maps otherwise. The mounted boards are great. I have them. I would recommend getting them if you're going to get the game. It does make it a little easier than, of course, having paper maps. Something like $30, $25, $30 for the mounted maps, just depending on where you get them. But if you're going to have a game like this on the table, as long as it's going to be on the table, yeah, get the mounted maps for it. I mean, I know everyone's got plexiglass and things of that nature. The only downside I would say as far as component quality is concerned is I did notice in my copy, and from what I was talking to some other people, they noticed as well, that the counters were not off, like they were not cut in such a way that they were off. They were all lined up properly, but some of the counters were just a touch longer than others instead of being a uniform size. So when you would go to pick them up, or you're using your tweezers to pick them up, sometimes that would be a little difficult because one might be a millimeter or two longer than another, and you could understand how trying to grab that with a tweezer, if you've got a couple of them on top of each other, would be an issue. That's one of the only downsides that I found as far as component quality goes. The rest of it, outstanding. It's GMT. They put out an excellent product. You guys know that. So, number 4 of my top solo games is Unconditional Surrender by GMT Games. Okay, who couldn't say they saw this one coming? Lock and Load Tactical, Lock and Load Publishing. The one I've got up here is Heroes Against the Red Star, and I got to say this is one of my favorites thus far of the ones I've played. Now that's not to say that I don't like the others. I've liked all of them. This one just offered the most for me, and then I'd probably like the thing a little more. I like the M1 Abrams and T-85s and tanks and all that stuff that's in it. But all of the lock and load tactical modules are good. So when I say Heroes Against the Red Star in this one, you can really interchange that with whatever game system module is more suited to you. If you like the Heroes of Normandy better, Heroes of the Pacific, although I do like Heroes of the Pacific, it has Marines in it, but so does the Vietnam module. So, and Vietnam is the one that I've got up next for my next playthrough. But I love lock and load tactical. All right, as far as the solo game goes, you're going to be hard pressed. One of the first things that strikes me about the games is the excellent component quality. When it comes down to counters, they have the best counters of any game that I've played thus far, period. Hands down, pre-rounded, they fit back in the sheets that they come in. You can literally store them in the sheets if you want to. Probably a little bit of pain in the butt, but they fit in there so nicely that after you punch them out, you can pop them right back in if you want, and they'll stay. Like I said, pre-rounded, nice and thick, sturdy, good graphics on them. They're just the best, hands down. And that's not to say that other companies don't have good counters. It's just I think these are the best of all the counters. Nice and smooth in your hand too. You don't have to clip them. I mean, you can see on the screen. I mean, they look nice. They work great for the game. As far as the maps are concerned for the game, they are paper maps, but they're a heavier cardstock paper, so they are less likely to tear. It's not poster paper like some tactical maps are, or some game maps are. The poster feel to them. They have the cardstock. It's thicker. It does require that you have something to hold it down. You can see in the video that I've got playing in the background that I've actually got a picture frame that I have the map mounted in, and that's to help keep it flat. But I would rather have to go to that extra extent because the map is of a higher quality and less likely to tear and have the back folded creases on it than to have one that'll lay down flat really well because it's just a piece of paper. So, obviously, I think they have the excellent quality when it comes to the components, just all the way around. Player aids are made of the same type material that the maps themselves are made on, so you don't have to worry about that either. Some people have said that the player aids are a touch big, but I think when it comes to wargaming, that's a good thing because a lot of the people who do play wargame are older. They're going to have not as good eyesight. No offense to you older guys out there. And it does help to have the player aids a little bit bigger so it's easier to read and you're not having to squint at tiny little print that might be on the counters or the player aids, something to that effect. They do have the option for X maps, which is what they call their basically double-sized maps. And it's an option. It's not something that you have to get. The maps that come with the games are perfectly fine. But if you want that bigger map, if you want to have it spread out over your whole table, you've got the option to get those. And they're not, overly expensive to get. There's actually a discount that if you order a games module and you get the X maps at the same time, they actually do knock off some of the price. So if you're going to get the X maps, I would just take and go ahead and get them when you order whatever module that it is that you're ordering at that time. Now, I haven't played every tactical game out there. Combat Commander, I haven't played. And I know someone's going to say this is sacrilege, but I haven't played ASL. And that's because ASL, some of the people I've talked to said, it's a lifestyle. And I can see that with as much as some people have invested in. But with all the gaming that I do and all the videos that I record, I can't get into a lifestyle. And ASL is not really solo suitable. From what I've seen, it does have a solo module out there that's rare as hell and hard to find. And it doesn't work the way that Lock and Load Tacticals does. So that's why Lock and Load Tactical is higher on my list. Now, I'm not saying that the other games aren't good. I'm sure they are good, but when it comes to Solitaire, I think Lock and Load Tactical is going to be at the top of the list. Now, you do have to keep in mind that you don't have the solo module built into the game like some of the others that I've mentioned. You can play the game solo straight out of the box where you're playing just both sides, but they do have a solo module that comes with a deck of cards and some player aids that help you in kind of running the AI itself. It's based off the deck of cards that was created by Academy Games for their Conflict of Heroes series, and that was actually developed by military personnel. Now, their system, Academy Games, was designed specifically for one game. All right, Waking the Bear, second edition, I think it was, that deck of cards was designed for, and they have some others that are going to come out that are designed specifically for other games in their series. Lock and Load went a different way with that and designed a generalized card system that could work with any of their modules. And that's what really gets me with this, is the fact that I can play a game set in World War III, 1985 roughly, or Vietnam, or World War II, or whatever other modules they come out with, and I only need that one deck of cards with it. Now, yes, occasionally I have situations where the cards are not saying exactly what I think the enemy should do in that situation, but that's been rather rare for the most part. And I found that after using the card system there for a while, that I've been able to predict fairly accurately what the cards are going to actually tell the enemy to do. And I like the fact that they've got player aids to go along with it that will take and kind of flesh out whatever the card's saying. It'll tell you, hey, look at, counter actions or, victory conditions, things like that. And you'll follow the player aid and it'll point you out, if this, then do this. If not, then do this. And you just kind of follow the flow chart around and find the order that most fits the game that you've got going on. And when you create a generalized system like this, the good part is it can be used with anything, and the bad part is that it can be used with anything. So it's not specific to your game. But you have to make the trade-off on it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's worked beautifully. It's allowed me to play a excellent tactical game by myself anytime I've wanted. And I actually played a scenario. You can actually watch it in my Heroes in Defiance series. And that scenario had a lot of hidden information in it. And at first I was thinking, this is going to be hard to solo, but I want to try it to see how well it does. So I went ahead and recorded it, made a play series about it. And the cards worked fine. There was no issue with it. And that partly had to do with the fact that the only hidden information was actually on my side. So it was just me hiding something from the enemy AI, but the enemy AI was able to react to me when I did reveal that information. Now, if it was a scenario that had hidden information on both sides, it probably wouldn't work as well, because you can't really hide stuff from yourself when you're playing by yourself. Unless you're doing some type of random chit pull. Something else that I've also enjoyed when it comes to Lock and Load Tactical is the fact that the rule set is in-depth. It is rather complex, but it's not overly so. And once you've played through a few games of it, you'll get it under your belt and you'll kind of get the hang of it, and it'll just kind of flow together. It's not overly complex, but it is complex enough to take and grit your teeth into it if you're wanting a good tactical experience that's simulating your tanks and your infantry and cover and concealment. And, there's smoke and artillery and air power coming into it and artillery coming from off the map. It has all of that into it. It's got helicopters into it. It covers all of that, but it's not so convoluted in a way that you're just kind of scratching your head going, oh, what the hell is this? Once you've played it a little while and you've got it under your belt, you can just kind of flow with it. But there is a base rule system that all the modules will operate off of, while see in each game you're going to take and get the base rule book that I'm talking about, but you also get your scenario rule book that has all the different scenarios that come with the game, but that will have scenario specific rules at the front of it. That way they can have just those little additions depending on what the case may be, what conflict that you're simulating in that tactical game. Whether it's okay, for example, in Heroes Against the Red Star, which I've got on the screen now, that scenario comes with rules for changes to spotting that have to do with the fact that in more modern times, tanks and vehicles came equipped with laser rangefinders and spotting equipment to more easily find their opponent, and you're not going to have that in a World War II scenario. So those rules are modeled into it, and then it has some rules about your Russian commanders and commissars, and they're being able to rally the troops through sheer political force and things of that nature. But they can possibly turn it can possibly go against them. I forget the specifics of it and how it works out. But each module will have that. It'll have special little addendums to the rules for that specific game, which I love. That way you know the basic rules, but then you just have to update yourself of what's specific to the game that I'm playing. If you're looking for a tactical game, set during any time period, really, they've got World War II all the way into modern, all across the globe. They've got others that are getting ready to come out. Many of them have expansions, so even if you do play it out, every scenario that comes with your module, you can get expansions for it. And there are compendiums which they put together all the different articles that have been printed up and scenarios over time into these booklets. That way you can take and use those and have one-stop resources for extra scenarios for your games if you've happened to have played through all the ones that your original game came through. They have 2 for the World War II era and 2 for the modern era. So excellent additions, excellent support from the game. They do have good customer support, so if you need something, you contact them. I did have one counter sheet out of all the games that I've gotten from Lock and Load Publishing that was misprinted. Contacted them, and I think it was something like a week later, it was in my mailbox ready to go. And it wasn't even misprinted that much. It was just a little bit off on the counter sheet, but enough to kind of knock one of the numbers. So for me, I gotta say Lock and Load Tactical. Just saying Lock and Load Tactical, it could be any game module. For me specifically, Heroes Against the Red Star. For you, just pick the one that you like best, that you're into that time period the best, because they cover all of it. Just pick the one that works for you. Is going to take my number 3 spot. Now let's get ready for number 2. Now for number 2, we have a new classic that was just released by DVG, Sherman Leader. This is one that started not too long ago and had released just a few months back. And I gotta say, I love it. It was actually the first one that I did a video on of DVG products, but it's not the first DVG game that I had owned. It's outstanding across the board. I mean, excellently done. I gotta say, component quality, outstanding. You can tell, because I have some of the older products from DVG, stuff that they had released years back, and you can tell they worked to improve their games over the time, over the years. You can especially tell that in some of the cards, because the card quality has improved, counter quality has improved. The counters in this game were pre-rounded, nice and thick. They actually really rivaled the ones that come in the Lock and Load Tactical series as far as the counters go. Excellent quality on the graphics that are on the counters, and as relaxing it is to just clip away at counters, that is kind of a mindless task that I don't mind not having to do. It is nice to have them already pre-rounded, and especially as much as games cost nowadays. A good game can cost you upwards of $80 depending on what game you're getting, but at least around $60. So it's nice to have that extra production quality put into it, where they're already rounded off, where you punch them out and you're good to go playing right off the bat. I know not everyone is anal about clipping their counters, but for those of us who are, it is nice to have that little bit already taken care of for you. DVG games are similar to each other. So putting Sherman Leader here, you could almost interject that with some of their other games and their different leader series. Tiger Leader, Hornet Leader, Phantom Leader, what was it, the Thunderbolt Apache Leader. They all revolve around the same core game system that has been adapted to whatever theater they're operating in. I think Sherman Leader takes it to the next level because you can tell they're learning from each game that they put out. Each game that's come out in the Leader series is always surpassing the one prior to it, and just a little bit. Like, okay, what did our fans like about the previous game? What did they not like? Okay, they didn't like this, but we're going to fix that, and we're going to improve it in our next game. And not only did they improve it, they actually updated one of their previous games. If you had Tiger Leader already, Sherman Leader came with the Tiger Leader upgrade kit to bring it into line with Sherman Leader's quality. And now I want to get Tiger Leader because I've got the upgrade kit for it. And I'm like, wow, I've got all these cool counters and cards and cutouts and player aids and things, and I want to get them down to the table and play with some tigers. So I'm going to have to look into doing that. So as far as components go, they've hit it. They've just blown that out of the water. You can see by looking at the graphics on the cards, easy to read, big enough for you to see. You don't need to squint at the tiny text or anything like that. Same goes for the counters. As far as the gameplay itself goes, a lot of DBG games take and operate on the principle that you will select whatever mission you're going to do. Then you're going to select your troops, your units, abilities, depending ammo, depending on whatever module you're playing. So let's focus on Sherman Leader. You're going to have a selection of different tanks, but it's not just tanks, based on Sherman. It's infantry, it's self-propelled guns, it's half-tracks, it's bazooka teams. They have a huge variety of different units that you can select. And for me, when it comes down to DVG games, that's my favorite part. That's the part that really gets to me, is that open ability to select whatever I want to select. If I want to have a large force of weaker troops, I can try that tactic out. If I want to have a small force of crack troops, I can try that out. It's completely up to me to win or lose based on the choices that I make. What units can I bring for however many purchase points, depending on what game you're playing. I think Sherman Leader, it's SO points. How many SO points you're given, you have to use those to the best of your ability to take and accomplish whatever your mission is. In this one, you're going to take and have a list of enemy battalions that you have to take out. And that's another good thing about this game. If you want to have just one evening sitting down and you just want to play a battle, you can do that. You could just randomly draw one of the enemy battalions, draw the troops for it, lay them out, pick what you want, and go. But it does have the nice long campaign system where you can take and play a game that takes place over their simulated weeks, and you've got refreshing points coming in, and then you're refitting your troops, and you're trying to keep your commanders de-stressed, so they simulate the fact that combat's going to take and have a toll on your troops, and you can't just keep sending them into battle time and time and time again. You have to take and give them that R&R, rest and relaxation, before they take and go back out. So then you're deciding not only what troops that you're bringing, but what troops are going to be actively engaged in this week's actions, and then rotating that out. And you have to make sure that you've got enough troops that you can have some that are taking part in whatever's going on this week, while some are getting some downtime, and then you're flipping back and forth, so you're not trying to burn yourself out. But then you've got to worry about, you've got casualties, so you have to replace those. So it's for a simple game system. It's not hard as far as the actual complexity of the game goes. And when it comes to DVG games, none of them are overly complex, and that's one of the big selling points for me, is that I can have a enjoyable tactical game experience without the brain burning, just, oh my god, do I have every single rule right? And speaking of the rules, more often than not, everything you need to know is right there on the table. And that's another thing that I've always pushed when it came to DVG games, especially here on Sherman Leader. You can see there at the top of the screen, the words there written there across the top is the turn sequence of play. You can start at your left, work across to your right, top to bottom on each one of those little categories, and it walks you through each turn, each game week, and you start left. When you get down to the right, you just go back to the left and restart it over again. Everything you need to know is there. So once you've read over the rule book, you have the knowledge to play the game, and you don't have to generally look at any player aids. It's all right there on the board for you. You can just look up, say, okay, I'm here at this part of the game. This is what I've got to do. And on down the line, there is a player aid. It's a little bit to the left of the screen, so you can't see it on this video I've got playing in the background too well. That does have the specifics that you're not going to remember. Things like modifiers, die roll modifiers, and enemy movement charts, and things like that are also there on the board, and it's all laid out nice and neat, so you're not having to thumb through a rule book or a bunch of different player aids to try to figure out what's going on this turn. It's generally very easy to keep track of your flow of the game and not having to worry about, you know, where you're at during that period of time. Now, you would think, because the battalions on these cards, the enemy battalions, it has listed down what troops are on there, so you would think that it wouldn't have a high replayability in the game, and that's actually not the case. They implemented something that I really liked, especially here in Sherman Leader, and it's your tank draw cup, your enemy tank draw cup. You can see there's an enemy Panzer III on the screen right now. That's, you know, one of the enemy tanks. And you're not going to know exactly what enemy tanks you're going to be fighting when you draw an enemy battalion. You're going to have the same, you know, if it's a half track or enemy infantry, those are going to be the same generic units. But you're going to take whatever, okay, say you're in 1942, you'll have a cup that has something like 8 Panzer IIIs, a couple of Panzer IVs, or 3 Panzer IVs, something like that in it, and it'll tell you 3 or 4 tanks or 5 tanks for this enemy battalion that you're going to face, where you're going to randomly draw those tanks out, and you know those are going to be the ones that you're going to fight during that mission. So even if you fought that battalion before, you've played, you know, against it, you're not going to face the same enemy battalion anytime. It's always going to be random, because you always have that little bit of random enemy draw with it. And especially as your campaign goes on, or you select later campaigns and it has a wider variety, because they do stick with, you know, what tanks the Germans had during certain periods of time. So if you select a mission in 1945, you're going to be facing a wider variety of enemy units than you would in 1942. But you're never going to know exactly which ones you're going to draw. You might get lucky and draw a bunch of easy Panzer IIIs, or you might get unlucky and draw the King Tiger and a couple of Panthers, and you're in for a world of hurt. And that's something else that just drives me crazy about this game, is that they went to that extra little bit of level. They didn't have to do that. They could have just had it printed on the card that, you know, there's these specific tanks, and had that just be the end of it. But instead they took the extra time to have that little bit of random enemy draw. Not completely, you know, you're going to have, like I said, set units for each enemy battalion card, but just that little bit of extra to keep the replayability up there for you, so you will never fight the same units twice. Not to mention the fact that you have all the different terrain that you can fight on, whether it be desert, jungle, forest, what's the other, winter, you know, winter weather, snow that you're fighting in. And then on top of that, you have all the different terrain that can be on, all the different obstacles that can be on those. You have trees, barbed wire, bunkers, things of that nature. And when you're putting out your terrain is going to be randomly drawn just like you randomly draw your enemies. So that just takes the replayability to a whole new level, because you're never taking and fighting the same battalion in the exact same terrain twice. So every match is going to be different, even if you select the exact same units and the exact same enemies for the campaign that you've selected. It's still going to be different time and time again. And even what you see on the screen right now, the enemy tactical movement, that's going to vary, because depending on the objective, the main mission that you've chosen, is going to determine how far down on that tactical movement your rolls are actually going to go. You're either going to go with a D6 roll or a D10 roll, so it simulates the enemy being less or more aggressive depending on how you roll. So even if you do fight the same units, they may be more aggressive one time that you're fighting them versus a different time that you're fighting them. As far as leader games go, I've played a handful of them. Sherman Leader has to be my absolute favorite out of the bunch. I really think they've nailed it, and I am thoroughly excited to see where they take Corsair Leader that's getting ready to come out, and see if Corsair Leader takes and replaces Sherman Leader as my top DVG game. Now, let's get ready for my number one. That's right, number one is Battle Hymn by Victory Games. I do have to apologize. I do have the game, and I actually have its expansion still in shrink wrap. That's amazing. I haven't bothered to crack that yet just because it is so rare. But I do have the game. I have not filmed it yet. I am going to be filming a game with it at some point soon. I apologize for not having a video for the background, but hopefully I will get a playthrough started and up for you guys of this one as soon as I can. Strangely enough, it is my favorite solo game, and I have not been able to take and get it in front of the camera yet. This one is an oldie but a goodie. Let's see, I think it's somewhere around the 80s. I think this was late 80s, early 90s. Someone in the comments will definitely let me know. I should have looked that up before I started the video, but oh well, too late now. This is based off the Ambush series. So if you don't know Battle Hymn, it's based off the same game principles as Ambush, also by Victory Games. And in it, you are controlling your counters represent individual troops. All right, so you're not controlling a counter that represents a squad or a platoon or a company or anything like that. It's individual, and this one, Marines, which is why I chose it as my favorite. In Ambush, it's individual soldiers. And the way you do it, and again, let me say I'm sorry that I don't have the video playing, but I will have pictures in the background that I borrowed off of Board Game Geek, just so you guys can see some of the counters and what some of the things look like. But you'll take and go from hex to hex, and it plays very slowly in that every hex is numbered, just like other war games that you played. But when you step on that hex, you're going to take and look at this decoder, I guess you could say. You'll slide it and go down to where it lines up with the hex that you're in, and then it'll give you a code that you will reference in this large playbook that comes with it. Both of them have it. And you'll look up that number that it shows you in the playbook, and it'll tell you what happens in that hex. A lot of times it's going to be, nothing happens, so you'll keep going, but then you'll take and it'll give you a paragraph to read, and you'll start reading it, and all of a sudden, bam, you've taken sniper fire, and it'll tell you that there's a Japanese sniper in a palm tree in this hex, and you'll have to take and put the enemy counters on the map. And prior to that happening, it's a real-time game, right? You're moving your counters, there's no enemies, or if there's no enemies on the board, then there's no turn by turn, all right? You're just moving along, you're checking a hex. As long as nothing happens, you keep going. But as soon as something happens and there's an enemy on the board, then it goes to this turn by turn sequence that has it's a long, convoluted initiative system, I guess a good way to put it, that determines who's going when at what points, and things of that nature, and whether or not your guys are aware because the turns represent at that point a matter of seconds. It's a very small period of time that you're simulating, and the first couple of turns of combat, your guys, not all your guys, might realize that there's an enemy troop there. So you could take and have some of your guys, respond and open fire on the enemy as others are, looking around trying to figure out what's going on. The leader's trying to take and get them involved in the combat that's going on at that point. And you'll take and, fight the enemy, whatever happens. And once they're down, you go back to that real-time-esque gameplay where you're moving on to the next text. And you're going to keep doing that as you play through the game. Check, and yes, it is monotonous. You have to check each and every hex that you enter. You don't have to check the hexes after you've entered them, right? So if you've already been through an area, you've cleared it, generally you're pushing from one side of the map to another to complete whatever objective it is. So the events it's only going to happen once. I'm not going to get into all the minute details of the rules, but there are markers to cover whether or not you've done an event, and then you're keeping track of what options in the game, or what, I forget what they call it, what story elements basically have occurred at this point, and then that'll increase the level of opposition that you could possibly be finding. It's a game that's designed completely for solitaire play. There is no multiplayer for this. Now, there is a multiplayer version of it where it operates off the same principle, where you're fighting an opponent. I forget the name of that one off the top of my head, but I'm not going to worry about it. There, you guys can look it up if you're interested in that. It's not one that I'll ever be playing. But you'll take and continue to push on with your troops, checking each hex as you go, pulling back into that real-time mode when you're clearing it. And I have to say, it is a experience like no other solitaire game that I've played. And it's good and bad in that aspect, right? It's great that the first time you play this game, it's outstanding. It is the best solitaire game that you ever play. But you can't really play it again. That is the biggest downside of Battle Hymn, Ambush, and all its expansions. And that's a good thing that it does have expansions. The one strong point that I pointed out in all the others, Lock and Load, DVG, all the others, Silent Victory, Unconditional Surrender. Unconditional Surrender is much longer, but they all have replayability. This game doesn't. It's one huge glaring weakness is that you already know what's going to happen. If you've played through that mission before, then you know, hey, Japanese sniper is going to pop out of the tree there, so you could try doing the mission where instead of going one route, you go a different direction and see what happens there. But generally, after you've played it a couple of times, you've really seen everything that specific mission has to offer, and you can play through the rest of them. I think there's like 12 in the base game, and there's more in the expansions. For the first game in the series, Ambush, you have the base game, and then there's 4 expansions for that. Good luck on getting them, because eBay charges some serious outlandish prices for that series. And I hate putting a game that's out of print as my number one, but I have to give it the credit that it's due. It's like I said, it is an experience like none other when it comes to solitaire wargaming, because it's that thrill, that what am I going to find? What's going to happen in that next text? And you're just sitting there and like you're tense as you decide where you're going to move your guys, and you've got your stack of guys and you got them low crawling, and you're trying to decide, do I go around this rock or up to this tree, or are they going to be there? Are they going to ambush me? If I go through this door, am I going to take a face full of lead, or are they going to hit me with a grenade? Is there going to be a landmine there? And you just don't know. And every hex is that intense as you're playing the game. No other game gives you that experience, but to give you that experience, it has to do it in such a way that there just is no replayability to the game. And it's unfortunate, but for a game like this, it's worth it. I have to say, if you can get yourself a copy of Battle Hymn or Ambush, absolutely do so. Generally, you can find Ambush fairly cheap. I've seen Ambush go for $40, $50. It seems to go in waves. Like eBay will get inundated with a bunch and the price will drop, and then for some reason it'll get rare and the price will go back up. So hang in there. Check the Wargamer Pay It Forward site on Facebook. I've seen it offered there a handful of times as well. I actually gave away one here on this site. If I ever come across another copy, I'll give that away to you guys as well. But I will not be giving away Battle Hymn. I can guarantee you that one. This is one that I like so much. I want my kids to experience it. I want to be able to play it with them and see how excited they get as they're pushing through the jungle trying to figure out what's going to happen. It is a game that is ripe for an app to be made for it. I am surprised in this day and age that someone has not bought the rights to it or come out with a clone that operates off an app-based system that could just be changed. Because since this operates off of a paper system, you know, you've got your sheets that you insert in the little folder to see what happens in each hex. You know, there's no changing that. You know, it's already printed out and it's ready to go, and your booklet is there, but once you've read through the booklet, you're done. An app would eliminate all that. You know, modders could take and just, you know, type up their own scenarios and what's going to happen in each individual hex. You know, this game is just ripe for someone to make an app-based version of it for modern gamers. I am wholly shocked that it hasn't happened yet. Hopefully someone will see this video and decide to take up the mantle and get it done. I would do it if I knew how to do computer programming, but I don't. I know how to yap at you guys on YouTube, so that's what I do. If any of you guys, you know, hear about it, by all means put it in the comments if someone's actually working on something like that, because this game is just too excellent for it to just stagnate as long as it has, with no one coming up with anything else for it, you know, a modern day version. Like I said, I hate to put a number one that is hard to find as this is. Battle Hymn is hard to find, but it, like I said, it's just so worth it. If you can get a copy, get yourself one. You won't be disappointed. If you are into solitaire wargaming and you like tactical wargaming, okay, get it. But if you're not into that, if you're not into solitaire, what are you watching the video for anyway? And if you're not into tactical, don't waste your money because you're going to pay through the nose, especially for Battle Hymn. Like I said, Ambush is cheaper to find. Battle Hymn is it's rare, so you're going to definitely pay through the nose on that one. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this one. I will do another probably top 5 or top 10 here in a few months, probably once I've got some more games under my belt. I want to play Enemy Action Ardennes and D-Day at Omaha, and there's a few more that are getting ready to come out. I want to check these games out and see where they fall on the list, you know, see if they're going to replace any of my top 5s, and, you know, just see what happens. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Y'all take care. I will see you in the next one.